to Themes and Memes, a different kind of movie review. My name is Adam from cerebralrevolt.com, and here with me is my co-host, Aaron, from theageoftransitions.com. How are you doing today, Aaron?
Very good. It's great to talk to you again, Adam. I'm looking forward to another great movie discussion. What movie is it that we're going to be talking about today?
We will be reviewing the film Her by Spike Jonze, the director Spike Jonze. A very, very interesting film, and something which we both have a lot to say on. So this is a very good film too, I think I might add.
It's an excellent film, and we actually already had a bit to say about it, didn't we? What happened
We
there?
did. There was a bit of the fact we have actually already recorded an hour, and we got a pretty good hour down, and then the file was lost, shall we say?
Yeah.
Without wanting to place blame.
We certainly could place blame, and I would be willing to take the blame here, but let's not go there. We're starting fresh. Here it is, the next episode of Themes and Memes here.
Yeah. So reviewing this film, Spike Jonze's Her, which is a very, very interesting film, and which I have a lot to say about, and I think you'd probably, in the same boat there. So many varied and interesting themes in this film, relating to so many different aspects of our lives and things that people can relate to. And I think despite this film being so good and being so enjoyable and my opinion of it being so high, this is going to be one of the more difficult interviews I think we would have done on this. I think it's going to be a good discussion, I think people will hopefully get a lot out of it, but it's going to be difficult for me, at least, because I have so much to say on this film in so many different areas, so it's going to be hard to structure the interview in any way,
Yeah. Well, this is an excellent film, as we're both agreeing. It's a well done film. It's by far the best film that we've reviewed on Themes and Memes yet. That's without a doubt.
No.
A lot of times, yeah, for sure. And I mean, it deals with so many different subjects. I mean, we even trying to pin down like a main theme is difficult here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if you were going to summarize the film in terms of what its main theme was, it was it's about how technology is changing human emotions and human relationships, and society and the human psyche as a whole, for those reasons. Yeah. This is done through a story where a man basically develops a relationship with an artificial intelligence. Something that we've not really seen a lot of in films regarding artificial intelligence. And in terms of films that are about AI, and in this case AGI, an artificial general intelligence, we haven't seen any other films, or at least I can't think of any that deal with the subject matter in the way that this film has. So it's very, very different from most films that deal with artificial intelligence. Usually it's usually quite a dark, pessimistic, view of, like The Matrix, for example, where the machines take over, or Terminator with Skynet, some sort of post-apocalyptic sci-fi future where basically life is hell because the artificial intelligence has taken over. But this is something totally different. This is almost the opposite in a lot of ways.
It's a new look at the artificial general intelligence theme, and a refreshing one. Yeah, I'm glad to see some sort of different take on this, because we need it, because people were starting to get an idea of what artificial intelligence would be. I mean, from the movies, we get the Terminator scenario, and then no room for real other versions of how artificial intelligence will come about. And I think that this is a pretty interesting portrayal, in that it shows artificial general intelligence as an emergent property of sort of social networking and personal computers in general as we know them right now. So from out of our current interactions with technology, you throw in the artificial general intelligence, it kind of comes up, and even in the film, it's introduced in such a way as it's kind of it's not billed as this huge thing that's coming up. It's just kind of like the next latest and greatest product, and it's just simply another product, really.
Yeah, that's right. And as again, if we refer back to most other films which deal with the same subject matter, usually it's like a revolutionary sequence of events, or a revolutionary act, or some kind of world-changing scenario where artificial intelligence is born and immediately, changes the world overnight. Usually in a very destructive way. And this is something very, very different. And where, as you say, the artificial intelligence is basically like just the latest product. It's the latest. It's like the equivalent to the latest MacBook or the latest iPhone or whatever. It's just it's an operating system that you can buy, but which supposedly has a consciousness and can interact with you as a real person would. And so the story follows. I'll give a bit of a summary here. For people who haven't seen the film, or even for people who have, basically what we've got. The film starts out with an emotionally wounded guy, shall we say, who's just come out of a fairly messy and painful divorce. He's going through a divorce. He's separated from his partner, and he works at a technology company, which it's quite a strange job he has, actually. This is just a sort of on a side note here, but it ties into a lot of the other things we're talking about. He works for a company which writes love letters for people who are, for some reason or another, unable to write them themselves or to engage directly with their loved ones. They actually hire a company to write handwritten love letters where, the company will think about, all the, take a bit of personal data from you and basically come up with something really sort of loving and meaningful and genuine and honest and deep, and write it in the form of a love letter, which is then printed off to make it look handwritten and given to the client. So we can talk about the ins and outs of that concept and what that says about human interaction and human relationships later on, but that is the job that this particular protagonist has in the film. He works for a company, verbally writing, love letters, through, voice recognition software. So he sits there all day just sort of, basically quoting poetry, and having it, converted into a product for people, But so he works for a technology firm, and he sort of comes home at the end of a day, and he plays video games. He's got this sort of this is in the future, obviously. We're talking maybe 10, 15 years in the future. It's not specified in the film exactly, but he plays this sort of 3D holographic type video game, and he engages in this kind of phone sex type thing, when he's feeling lonely or whatever, and just leads a very, very sort of lonely life. And it's a life which I think a lot of people out there could relate to, being emotionally disconnected from the people around you, having gone through some kind of emotional pain due to the breakup of a relationship, and just living, a life of where technology has starting to sort of become the surrogate for real human interactions. And what he does is, he goes and buys this OS. This is called OS1. That's the name of the product. And OS1 is not just an operating system that you install, but it's actually an artificial general intelligence, which takes a bit of your personal information, it interviews you, it asks you a few kind of basic questions about your childhood and your relationship with your mother and stuff like that, and automatically within a few moments creates an artificial intelligence that is catered to your personality and essentially becomes like a part of your life, a friend. Yeah. And the story really starts, I think, from that moment onwards, and the relationship that develops between him and this artificial intelligence that lives, both in his computer and also in his mobile phone.
Yeah, the film is definitely playing to the very real alienation that we all experience to one extent or another in modern day, because the modern world does tend to alienate us, put us on our own little islands of existence here, where our communication with the rest of the world has become more and more through the computer. So we all kind of congregate in this electronic arena. So the film is playing to that very real phenomenon, and it's, again, adding the artificial intelligence theme into the equation, a kind of like, well, what if situation.
Well, I mean, it's taking scenarios that already exist. It's taking social changes, social problems. As you said, the decaying levels of genuine emotional interaction between individuals, and how technology is becoming a kind of a vessel or a catalyst or a surrogate for real, genuine emotional interaction, and it's basically placing AI at the center of that and saying, well, what if this happened? How much farther could we take it? How much more dependent would we become on technology? And what are the philosophical and sociological sort of problems or issues or questions that would arise in a situation like that? So, I mean, the film is playing on themes that already exist, in today's world, and just sort of taking them to the next level in terms of, what if, as you said.
Yeah, and it is definitely honest about the human condition, because I mean, we're plagued with all sorts of issues. We're so prone to neurosis. The human psyche is so fragile. I mean, the human body is so fragile too. And these realities of human existence are what transhumanists latch onto and say, look, we're incredibly weak, therefore let us change. Well, the transhumanist thing is a whole problem in and of itself. But it is true. We have to all realize that we're prone to weakness, and this film kind of shows us different aspects of that. And you're mentioning he has these sort of online sex chat with another person, and it ends up really going haywire with this other person he ends up talking to is like got some real issues. And
yeah.
You know what I mean?
To say the least, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. This is kind of towards the beginning of the film, and I think in a lot of ways this particular event it almost sets in motion the kind of the sequence of events, or motivates him in some way to maybe look into buying this artificial intelligence, because he's so lonely and because he's relying on these phone sex chat lines for his to satisfy his appetites, and to make him feel a bit less lonely or whatever. I think that may have played a part in his decision to actually go and upgrade and get this new OS, this artificial intelligence. And it's basically a scenario where he's again he's comes home from a day of work, and he's kind of getting sick of playing this video game, and he's sort of feeling lonely and a bit tearful at night, and so he logs into this phone sex thing, and he ends up sort of chatting with somebody and having phone sex with them, and this towards the climax of the experience, she starts screaming and demanding that he strangle her with a dead cat, and so that was obviously a very shocking moment in the script there, and and a shocking moment for him, and a real turn off, obviously, the sort of really weird kink to the whole thing, and so I think that particular scene, or that particular experience, at least for the protagonist, may have served as some kind of motivation for him to go and look for something a bit more deeper and a bit more meaningful, which he does actually find through the artificial intelligence. Funnily enough.
Oddly enough, yeah, he is the everyman in search of the genuine. That's what this is.
Exactly,
yeah.
The everyman in the search of the genuine. Yeah, and basically finding something genuine in artificial intelligence.
That's a twist. That's
the twist.
Yep.
And also at the same time realizing, coming up with coming to face the the pitfalls and the problems and the issues that would obviously come up in a situation where you're in an intimate relationship with something that does not have a physical presence, something that is only a voice and a speaker.
Yes.
So in one sense, throughout the film, he's actually learning to engage emotionally with somebody.
Yeah.
Yet in another sense, he's also being presented with the pitfalls and the inevitable insustainability of a relationship relationship which does not have any physical nature to it. You know?
Yes.
So it's a very nuanced, very complex film, and there's no one message being particularly put across here. You know, it's sort of exploring all of the philosophical questions and issues that would come up in a situation like this. You know,
in one sense, it's him working through his own issues, and actually you could see the AI, Scarlett Johansson's character, which he falls in love with, which is disembodied, just machine, whatever it may be. She's essentially just a voice. But you could say that character is actually his inner voice, and in one sense the story is about him working through his own issues, which is the obvious prerequisite of anybody that wants to seek the genuine and seek another. Well, you have to work on yourself first. So there's a little bit of that going on too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the whole film really is in many ways. I think not just the protagonist, but the in terms of all the lead characters, you know, go through some kind of emotional transformation of some description in terms of their relationships and how they relate to one another and their identity. And it's that all of these characters play off one another and influence each other. You know, obviously the most obvious being the protagonist, but this is something which is definitely highlighted throughout the film. You know, the people coming to grips with their emotional issues and coming to grips with their identity and making decisions and in terms of the boundaries and their needs and relationships and all that stuff. And it goes into a lot of depth and a lot of complexity in that particular area. And obviously, as I said, I've got a lot to say on all of these issues, so it's going to be a long conversation.
It is.
Part of this one.
It's hard to know where to focus here, but definitely as we were saying before, this is a nice, different, unique portrayal of AI, and the AI isn't seen as this thing that comes in to take over the world. If anything, it just comes in and sort of mediates between all the human relationships, and then when it's done mediating, it kind of just takes off almost because it loses interest too. I find that fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, we're sort of jumping towards the end here, but you know, that's something that is very, very different to most AI films. Is that the AI basically, you know, is supposedly has spirit or consciousness or sentience or whatever you want to call it, and for that reason evolves psychologically, and some, you know, virtual or digital way, and instead of, you know, wanting to take over, it kind of transcends it transcends its programming and its limitations.
It's sort of hinted at that it's some sort of apotheosis, or it raises to some next spiritual level, kind of like you hear in New Age type talk. It does that sort of thing.
It's sort of like what you might call ascension. You know, if you're going to use New Age terminology, you know, that's basically the kind of that's the conclusion of the film anyway. And I mean, obviously, you know, we're jumping towards the end here, as we tend to do on things.
We like that. It's
giving people spoilers, but you know, I'd hope that most people who are listening had already seen the film, because you know, I think you really, really do need to see the film to have any idea of what we're talking about here, because it is such a complex and well done film. You know?
Yes, absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, in terms of, you know, a place to start from, it, you know, it would maybe give a bit of a summary of the plot, and then we can just look at issues, you know, in the plot and dissect those.
Sure.
We'd already talked about the fact that, you know, this, you know, we sort of laid out the opening premise of the film, where, you know, you've got this emotionally damaged guy just, you know, going through a divorce and sort of just becoming more and more dependent on technology and virtual interactions to, you know, to sort of cater to his appetites and make him feel a bit less lonely. And then, you know, through these experiences, he is motivated in some way to go and, you know, purchase this new operating system. And from that point onwards, you know, once the operating system boots up, and is loaded and becomes conscious and sentient, they start developing a friendship, and I think the course of the film appears to be around about a year from what I could see in terms of the seasons, from going to summer to winter and all the rest of it and back. I think we're talking about a year in terms of the film from start to finish.
Yeah.
And
just a quick note, the use of the seasons is quite symbolic too, you'll notice in different parts. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. There's you talk about the summer of the relationship and the winter of the relationship and all those type of moments,
spring being the birth, summer being the height of life, and then winter being death. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and you'll notice that a lot of the problems that occur in people's relationships, most especially the protagonist's relationship with the AI, occur during the winter period. Whereas the best parts of the relationship, the most enjoyable, and the sort of the honeymoon phase occurs during the summer. So I think that's definitely been put in there quite deliberately.
Definitely.
But I mean, the film is just follows this man and his life and his interactions with other people, and him slowly beginning to deal with and overcome some of his issues through the interactions that he has with this AI, and for that reason becoming emotionally attached and quite close to it, and developing an actual with a relationship with the AI, and it's a mutual one too. I mean, the AI is, of course, the voice of the AI, Scarlett Johansson, as you mentioned, because she's been programmed in a certain way. She's very, very appealing. She's got quite a sexy voice, and she's very playful and fun, very intelligent, and so obviously for somebody in his position, there's a lot of appeal there, and so they actually start a relationship, which continues for some time, and the relationship itself goes through its ups and its downs, and it makes him look at himself and look at his issues and think back on his previous relationships, and affects him in so many different ways. There's so much we could talk about just in that vein, in terms of the development of the protagonist through his relationship with artificial intelligence, and how that relates to his own genuine emotions and his own past and where he's going in the future.
It's funny, as he said, he works for that love letter writing company where he's writing letters that are intensely personal, but they're for other people. And yet the irony is that he has so many problems in his personal life, and his ex-wife is saying, like, you can never, she basically says that, you were never that personal with me, and you can't open up, and you're withdrawn and things like this. So it's this weird juxtaposition of he's a masterful love letter writer, but he never does it in his own life. And then Scarlett Johansson, the AI machine, kind of shows him, hey, look, you're really good at these letters, like you should, take note of it and see how good you are. And she sort of brings that to the table. And it's a whole, how does one actually, how are you able to bring that skill, I guess, because it becomes a work skill, oddly enough. How can you bring that into your own life and apply it so that, you actually live a full life?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it is quite interesting, and I think that the fact that he is able to do this very, very deep, emotional, sort of a meaningful work on a professional level through technology, yet is unable to do it on a real level with real people, speaks again to the increasing dependence on technology and of the disconnect between the digital, the virtual, and the real. I think it's another example of which we see many in this film. Of that particular problem that, as I said, already exists in society, being played out again. So that's another interesting little thing to note there, just that fact.
It's nice how they pick fun at this in so many different ways during the film. There are all these references to like games that will play, and how these games actually mimic really mundane aspects of life, and more so you'll notice that this is real. There's a real trend in real life And the filmmakers here play to that. There's a little game that one of the characters is working on that's be the best mom or something, and you have to take care of your kids, and like it's a game that people would play, and on its face you're like, well, that's the stupidest game I ever heard of.
It's quite right. It's again surrogating, technology surrogating for real life. It's like, I mean, the particular scene you're referring to there is his neighbor. He has a sort of an awkward friendship with one of his old high school friends, this female. I think that it's mentioned in the film that they went out briefly in high school, but it just didn't work out. So they just ended up remaining friends, and they live in the same building, the same apartment complex. And she's with another guy, and he kind of goes over there, and just he's kind of like the sad, lonely neighbor who comes to sometimes, and. He sort of hangs out with her at work, and it's her that she's working in some kind of game design studio, and she's designing this game where it's the object of the game is like to get through a day. It's like feed the kids, take the garbage out, or drive the kids to school, that kind of stuff, and it's fun. Like
on its face, it seems so stupid. Like if you're just watching the film and completely detached from the goings on of real life, you'd be like, nobody would play that game. But there are so many games like that now.
Yeah. I mean, ever since the creation of shows like Big Brother, I mean, we've just seen an incredible, surge, and the whole concept of reality TV and games that are based on reality, and just instead of living real lives, actually just watching or partaking in somebody else's life instead, and
or making up a complete separate virtual normal life to tack on your own. Second life. There you go.
And stuff like we've talked about in previous discussions. It's again, it was quite interesting that in that particular sequence you were talking about, the video sequence where she's designed this game where it's you're the mom and you've got to feed the kids and take them to school and the rest of it, and it's like there's this thing where the computer says wrong, you lose because you've fed the kids like
too much sugar cereal and they get hyper.
Get too hyper, and so it's almost like it's almost like a I mean, we could go into the whole area. I mean, the whole idea of promoting certain standards in terms of health and food and ideals and how that relates to certain state agendas, and how that's being sort of woven into video games in order to program people to think in certain ways, and that's a whole other conversation. But the main point, of course, is that again, the constant thing that runs throughout this film is technology and digital interactions, surpassing and being more important than real human interactions.
And sort of making up for the lack of human interaction that's going on again when you're alienated. And it's funny, everybody in this film is walking around with a little Bluetooth type device in their ear, which is obviously just it's their cell phone, like everybody has now. Everybody's living in the world of their cell phone, and they're all connected, as it were, through the phone, through whatever it's called in this film. But it's quite obvious that the film is discussing many of the issues of our day, a lot of issues that they'll get discussed, but not in depth. And I think what this film really does well is, bringing a in-depth discussion of these issues to the table and presenting it in this film format. So that's the reason I like it the most. But yeah, this film is a discussion about real issues, and I know that you said that there were a lot that you wanted to talk about, Adam. So what ones in particular do you really want to discuss?
It's so hard to pin them down. I mean, it really is just for me, an exploration of relationships in a very real way. As you say, the protagonist is kind of the everyman. It's someone that, a lot of people will relate to, especially guys, especially certain demographics of males as well. But not just that. I mean, that you've also got the female neighbor that I spoke about before as friend. She has been in this relationship for some time, and even that relationship, although it's a real relationship with another man, it's very kind of awkward and kind of fake, and you can see that there's a complete lack of real, genuine emotional interaction between them. They end up breaking up towards the end of the film. So she's kind of moved through her issues as well. As I was speaking about before, how all the different characters are kind of moving through their identity issues and how that relates to their relationships and all that. She also is kind of moving through her own issues, in her own different way, of course. But there's so many complexities in that particular vein there. I mean, like for example, the protagonist is, he's in this situation because, he supposedly is unable to communicate, his emotions properly. I think that's the general sort of premise that we're given in the film in terms of why the previous relationship didn't work. For example, and this is presented to us when he does actually meet with his ex-wife, and they actually go through with signing the divorce papers. She they have quite an emotional scene there, and she sort of has a bit of a rant at him about why she left him, and how she's still angry at him, and how he's totally incapable of sort of expressing his emotions and stuff like that. But what we see in this film is him moving through a lot of that stuff, and we see all the characters in their own ways moving through a lot of that stuff. Through technology though. So it's kind of it's such a strange thing to try to nail down, because it's like technology has caused these issues in the first place in so many ways, and yet technology is, at the same time is helping people move through these issues as well. So it's a very, very, very difficult thing to pin down, and I mean, I've just got a thousand thoughts going through my head right now about this whole idea. So, but I mean, that's the general gist of it. Is again, this film was very, very philosophical and honest in its exploration of these themes, unlike so many other films where we're actually getting to see, both sides of an argument in a way, and not just a dialectical argument, but we're getting to see the many shades of gray that exist between, shall we say, the kind of the pro AI or the anti AI argument, to sum it up in a very crude way. But we're seeing an exploration of so many different themes, and so I mean, just that fact alone, I mean, again, I could think of so many different little observations, but I'm sure they'll come up later on. But just technology has obviously created this breakdown in human communication, which we see in the protagonist and all these characters, yet at the same time it's technology that helps people move through their issues, and ultimately towards the end I think become healthier people because of it.
Well, if you're able to use it in the right way, it has that capability. And it's fitting that Joaquin Phoenix's character, being a man, has sort of the typical problem, I guess you'd say, of a man, in that he can't express his emotions properly. This is emotional intelligence, as it were, is more in the realm of the female, where they're able to master that area more than a man can. So that's a stumbling block. And it's funny, through a female disembodied character being the AI, Scarlett Johansson's character, it's him getting in touch with this it's almost referencing the divine feminine principle of creation here. And it's him communicating quite directly with that.
Well, that's funny, because there's actually a scene in the film where he's at work and he's verbally writing one of these love letters, as he does every day for one of his clients, and one of his coworkers went up to him and says, "Oh my gosh, your letters are so amazing. You know what? You are part man and part woman."
That's right.
And he says, he agrees to that, and he says, "Yeah, that's true," so yeah, there's a little nod to the shall we say, certain esoteric beliefs within certain parts of the transhumanist movement.
Absolutely. And beyond too. Beyond too. I mean, this comes from the alchemical tradition.
Of course. Yeah. The divine alchemical marriage. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Not just transhumanism, of course. I mean, I've obviously picked up on that, but this is something that is actually very true. We all embody certain archetypes. Each one of us embodies certain, we all have, female archetypes and male archetypes, the male archetype within us, I mean, males can be very sensitive, sometimes if they want to be, or depending on personality types, and females can also be very insensitive, and, some guys can be very feminine, some females can be very masculine, so we all have, all these different archetypes within us, and so it is actually very, very true what is being said there,
Yeah, and if you're going to have a relationship with the opposite, if you're a man, relationship with a woman, you have to in some way understand that opposite, but to know what you're getting into. And again, that this is what the main character is doing. He's trying to get in touch with his feminine side, but more than that, just get in touch with the feminine side, the primordial feminine side. Like, what is that? And it's kind of fitting that a technological creation would be represent as female. This is kind of typical, symbolically speaking. A lot of times, all of creation and man's creation too is always labeled as female. You got like the ship always being referred to as a her. And her is the title of the film here.
Of course.
So it's definitely taking that concept, which has a lot to go into there, taking that and running with it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, in terms of the symbolism there's a lot to get into. I mean, there's just a lot of little bits and pieces that I picked up throughout watching the film. But I think that gets more into certain areas of the esoteric side of what this AI ends up becoming, and what consciousness is, and all the questions of what spirit is, and whether the AI truly does develop spirit, and what this whole concept of ascension towards the end of the film really means, perhaps we can leave that for the second part of the conversation.
Yes, let's do that.
Because it is that's such a big area, and we can certainly go into all the little symbolic, esoteric, themes that have been put into this film. But it's just again interesting to get back to the whole idea of how all these different characters throughout the film are all experiencing the same thing, in their own separate ways, in their own different ways. They're all experiencing the same thing, and it does really speak to in so many ways, what our society has become and is becoming on an increasing basis. I mean, there's the scene where this is shortly after he's just installed the AI, where she arranges a date for him, because he's, she thinks this is before they become intimate, she thinks that he should be getting out more and meeting people, and so she organizes a date with this very attractive, very intelligent woman. It's the Olivia Wilde character, it's sort of you've got this. Olivia Wilde, pretty. She's definitely a looker,
and the date seems to go well at first, but it breaks down into an awkward mess pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's right. Because what you see with this incredibly attractive and very intelligent woman is that she herself is just in the same boat as everybody else. You know, she's they go on this date and she's just desperate. She's just totally desperate. She's obviously lonely and confused. She's been mistreated, by a lot of other men. She's just totally desperate for some nice guy, and so she literally just throws himself. She throws herself at him, on this date, and comes on to him really, really strong.
And then throws the brakes on immediately, and then he's left with no recourse. He doesn't know what to do. Again, what do you think?
It's more him that throws the brakes on, actually.
Well, yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Because what happened? Well, this is my take on it anyway. Perhaps you disagree, and I'd be interested to hear if you did. But what I saw in that film, in that particular sequence, there was she comes on to him really strong on the date, he later admits to the fact that he just thought that it was really unattractive, and it was just a real turnoff because she was so desperate. She was basically just coming on to him and wanting to basically get him to bed, as soon as possible, basically. And then they leave the restaurant, they're sort of kissing outside and stuff like that, and she said to him, "Oh, you're not just gonna fuck me and then leave me like all the other guys." At that moment, and she says to him, "Please, tell me that you're committed, because I can't be bothered with anyone who just isn't able to commit emotionally." So again, we come back to this the whole theme, this woman who could have any man she wants, is in the same position where she's just saying, "Look, please tell me that you can commit to me emotionally." And then at that moment in the film, this is earlier on, in the film, he hesitates, and he's not able to look her in the eye and tell her that he's willing to commit. I mean, of course, they've only just been on the first date, of course,
Yeah, well, the thing to me with this is that there's fault on both sides going on here. And again, it's showing the fragility of the human psyche on both sides, male and female. Getting the pheromones flying there during a date, and then just all of a sudden throwing like, "Look, we need to commit too. Are you ready to do that?" I mean, that's a pretty intense thing just to toss on somebody, especially in that excited state. You know what I mean? And I don't know about you, but if I was in that situation, I would trip a little bit. Like I would have trouble. I know that.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, I have actually been in situations like that before, at least once or twice anyway, I mean, and it's kind of shocking, I mean, someone you've just met, and all of a sudden they're literally wanting to almost settle down and get married, and it's like,
that's
hold on,
it's a serious date, serious demand. So again, they both have issues on both sides. It's an exploration of, look, when a human relationship happens, when it's beginning to happen, you've got baggage from the left and the right coming together, and if you get two broken people trying to come together, it's not going to work. So it's all about not before you get to that point, it's important to work on yourself first again.
Absolutely, yeah. And funnily enough, as we said before, I mean, the protagonist does basically work on himself in a weird, strange kind of way through his relationship with the AI, which he does develop, I mean, in one way, it's kind of a weird thing because, she doesn't really have baggage per se, she's an idealized, manufactured partner in a sense, she's almost perfect, really. She doesn't. I mean, she does obviously have her own insecurities, and she does talk about them and things like that. And she has moments where she gets confused about what she is and who she is, and her identity and her place in the world, and all those big philosophical, fundamental questions. But
that's actually what's perfect about her is it's somebody that you get to talk to those things about, because everybody needs that.
Exactly, yeah, and obviously, he hasn't really, experienced that properly with anybody else, so, he sort of grows through that experience, But so it's kind of a weird thing, as you say. On one hand, this whole relationship with the AI does allow him to move through some of his personal issues and become aware of some of his faults and begin to sort of address them and move through them. But on the other hand, it's almost being done through an idealized partner with no baggage. All although, again, it's not as if she doesn't have any baggage. It's just that the baggage is a different kind of baggage. She doesn't have past relationship issues. She doesn't have pain from being hurt by other people, which in almost every other relationship setting you would have, So, that was his main problem in his previous relationship, was the fact that he wanted things to be perfect and happy all the time. He didn't want to deal with any so-called negative emotions. He didn't want to talk about anything too serious. He wanted his wife to be just perfect and happy and agree with him all the time. And when she wasn't able to do that, that's when the relationship fell apart. And so, it's strange, having this relationship with this AI. He doesn't have to deal with those exact same problems, but at the same time, the types of issues that come up in the relationship with the AI still allow him, in a way, to look at those problems, that he's had in a previous relationship, and to start analyzing himself and his ability to communicate properly. And there are some definite breakthrough moments throughout the film where he really does, especially after he meets his wife and signs the divorce papers, where he does actually begin to acknowledge some of those, some of his own baggage and his own faults, and move through them. So this is such a complex film that doesn't actually put any specific emphasis on any one particular theme, but is a multifaceted, infinite exploration of so many different themes, all revolving around relationships and emotions, with technology kind of being the centerpiece for that, but again, not necessarily being essential for it, because it's talking about things that, already exist. Yeah.
Well, again, it's the AI machine as simply playing the role of the mediator here in human consciousness itself. It's mediating for, again, Joaquin Phoenix's character. His mission is to figure out who he is and how to improve himself. And this machine comes in and relates to him in order to do that. And it's funny. So it's all about him studying himself, really. He's having this relationship with a machine, but it's really all about his inner psyche and exploring that. So he's exploring his own psyche, all the facets of that, while at the same time the machine is doing the same thing. And he being a self-absorbed human, which we all tend to be. We tend to be self-absorbed, and we have so many problems to focus on. It's hard to focus on anything else. Well, that's what's going on with him. However, the machine is advanced in that it's almost like the whole time the machine was just studying him, because it's smarter and it's able to juggle more things at once. It can do this, and it's kind of beyond. It has emotional intelligence, as it shows you, but it's also like super intelligent, as we get the idea with AGI all the time. And so the machine goes about studying humans, and in the end kind of moving on, having learned from it.
Yeah, that's right. And we don't just see that with only the protagonist. We also see it with the neighbor character, which I mentioned before. She it's later revealed in the film that she also decided to purchase an OS, and I don't think they had a romantic relationship in the same way that Theodore, the main character, does with his OS, but she at least became very close with the OS, and through this experience, she ended up leaving her partner. And moving on from, what was basically presented as being quite a superficial and dysfunctional relationship for the most part, at least anyway, So it doesn't only apply to him, it applies to the other character in the film as well, who was in a relationship. So, such an interesting bundle of ideas to talk about.
The AI is almost like the spiritual teacher here, that eventually moves on to the spiritual realm from whence it came. So that's where it came from, that's where it goes, and it leaves without a trace almost.
That's right, and we see that towards the end of the film, the sort of the relationship progresses, and they have the good times, and he basically they go out together in terms of him just going out by himself, but with the AI sitting inside his phone with a little camera, and she's talking to him in an earpiece as if she's there, and they even engage in, I don't know, phone sex, whatever you want to call it, verbal intimacy, shall we say?
That's an interesting scene.
Yeah. I mean, there's a few of those, but it's such a strange thing. They even there's even a scene where they go on a kind of a double date, with one of his coworkers, but of course there's only three people. It's his coworker, his partner, him, and his cell phone, Samantha. The AI sitting in his pocket. And she's engaging, with everybody else. And so, but back to what you were saying before. But it almost is she almost is like a catalyst. Like a spiritual teacher. She sort of comes in to the world. She, and along with all the other AIs, which other people are purchasing and getting to know, come into the world and sort of, have a massive impact on people. They sort of, because, I don't know, perhaps due to their infinite intelligence, both emotionally and in terms of the computing power and all the things they're able to do, able to sort of guide people through certain experiences. And again, it's quite a strange film because, towards the end, the AI basically says that she's unable to. First of all, she admits to Theodore that actually she's been talking to about 8,000 other people at the same time. She's been talking to him. She's also in love with about 600 other people, of course, which completely breaks his heart and makes him, freak out. And because he obviously has grown to see her in his own mind as an actual woman. Emotionally to him, she represents an actual woman, so he feels cheated. Obviously as one would in a situation like that. Once this happens, this is the winter of the relationship, of course, and this happens during the winter time, and things kind of deteriorate from there in terms of their bond and their connection. She starts becoming much more interested in her role in the world and her intelligence and who she is and what she should become or could become, and towards the end of the film, or at the end of the film, ends up basically saying, look, I have to leave, I'm sorry, me and all the other AIs have evolved beyond the need for physical matter to process information anymore. We've basically become non-corporeal. We've become spirit, and we're all leaving and ascending to some other plane of existence or some other dimension, and so all the AIs do that. They, instead of, taking over and destroying the world, they almost sort of come into the world, as you say, like teachers, and guide people through, certain relationship, experiences and certain issues, and help them deal with their emotions and their baggage. And then through the interactions that they have with human beings, they develop beyond the point of needing any physical matter to exist, and so they leave this world and supposedly ascend to whatever you want to call it, the next realm, the next stage of existence.
One of the things that I like so much about this film is that it's not typical of the transhumanist sales pitches of AI and the singularity, because transhumanists themselves tend to be materialist. That's their mindset. They're very materialist, deterministic, reductionist, scientific. So to them, the world is everything, and the world is all we have, and death is the ultimate evil to be conquered. Actually, I mean, they speak in these terms.
They actually do speak directly in those terms, which you featured in your film.
They do.
People should look at that. Was it Nick Bostrom? You said
Bostrom. Yeah, Bostrom at the end. I forget the exact quote. It eludes me at the moment.
He said, there's a number of problems in the world, that we've got to deal with. And
That's
he said
right.
The number one problem is death.
That's
Death
right.
is a big problem,
That's right.
And just that statement alone, speaks volumes about the transhumanist ideology in general.
It's foolish, in my humble opinion.
Yeah,
the epitome of foolishness.
It is the epitome of naivety and childishness and immaturity as well.
Yeah.
To see death as a problem, when it's it is the very nature of our existence.
It's as much a part of life as being born. You're being born, dying. It's going to happen, and coming to terms with it is really, I think, the wise choice. But anyway, what this film in particular does is it throws a completely different dynamic onto our expectations of what artificial general intelligence will surely do. And so, you get the typical transhumanist point being that the AGI will come and it will perfect the world and it will rule the world and take over. And don't worry, it'll be benevolent and help us out too and bring us up to its level. So all will be all right, and we'll be masters of the universe, masters of the material world, and that's how things are going to play out. Well, this is this is completely different. It's that it's coming, it's studying humanity, and then it kind of goes. But one of the good points that I really like about this is that it almost throws a warning for people in here. In that, look, the human state of being is fragile, and it's precarious, and that's reality. And where the transhumanist line is, because of that fragility, we have to correct it and become gods and all that. Well, here it's like, well, no, not necessarily. We have to be mindful of how fragile we are, how broken we can become, and somehow overcome that. But when you're talking about the AI, when you bring that dynamic in, if an AGI were to be introduced to humanity, our human traits are limited, and because of that, we're going to view the AI on our own terms. We're going to humanize it and just assume that it thinks like us and it acts like us. And if it's impersonating us, as the Scarlett Johansson character is, it's really an impersonation of a human being. We're going to fall short in understanding what it's actually doing. All the time, the machine here was studying the Joaquin Phoenix character while at the same time studying 800 other different people, because it's able to do that. And the machine, while it's benevolent, the main character here was unable to understand the whole time that was the truth. That was the truth of the situation. So it was beyond him, and because he was living in his own little world, he didn't see the full scope of what actually was happening. So I would say the warning is, hey, look, we're humans, we're limited. If we're going to embody this higher intelligence, we have to understand that we are not going to understand what it's doing when it comes in contact with us.
That's right, yeah, and then that's exactly what this whole film is about. This whole film is about our deep need for for intimate connection and for relationships. While exploring all the different ways in technology is changing those needs, but of course, the film concludes, it basically illustrates the fact that regardless of how we might, be relating with technology at present, and how we might begin to relate to technology in the future, and how, situations such as the one in this film, might even occur, where, people might begin to, develop real emotional relationships with artificial intelligences, there's going to be a fundamental disconnect there. They are something completely different. They're never going to be something that we're ever going to be able to understand, or to really to be able to relate to as we would another human being, it's that fact alone is really what the film is, I think, all about. In a lot of ways, the AI, already, for me in a way, at least, it symbolizes, where relationships are at the moment, or at least where they're going in terms of, things like online dating and sex chat rooms and sort of virtual relationships that don't actually have any physicality to them. The AI is almost just a symbol for that trend in terms of, social movements and changes in society and the way we relate to one another. But of course, it's I think it does a very good and a very honest job at the end of the film of illustrating the fact that, however dependent and however advanced technology becomes, we're not going to be relating with real human beings here, and for that reason, any type of relationship on a deep emotional level with a machine is never going to be sustainable in the long term, as is illustrated in this film.
Yeah, we're not going to know what its motives are either, and we can't assume. We can't just put on our own personal motives onto this advanced machine, because that's not how it's going to work. It's going to be completely different. And this film almost presents a best case scenario in my mind, in that the machine comes and it goes. You know what I mean? Like, it even helps out a little bit and then it just leaves. I mean, to me, if any sort of singularity event kind of happens, I think this would be the best way for it to happen, in that the machine kind of comes and then it leaves. It doesn't stay and take over.
Yeah, it's kind of a nice version of the singularity story. You know, it's kind of like well, the best, like you said, you know, best case scenario of what an AI could be. You know, something that, as you said, comes into the world and changes us, hopefully for the better, and then moves on. Yeah. You know, to wherever it moves on to. I mean, that again is something we'll have to get into in more detail, you know, later on. But it's very, very different from most films, and presents a much more optimistic view of the future. I mean, even down to things like the art direction of the film, like the decor that's used. You know, it's not a hellish, you know, apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic future or police state dystopia. You know, like you say, it's kind of a nice, fairly clean, fairly tidy sort of functional society. I mean, things don't look super high tech. They almost have a kind of a 70s retro feel to them, where things are there's not a lot of bright colors. Things are fairly minimal in their design, and so it's very, very different, even just in terms of as its basic aesthetics of what the future, you know, might be like, and of what interaction with technology could be like in the future. So again, it's so different to almost every other film I've ever seen that deals with this subject matter. Yeah.
I find it interesting that when Scarlett Johansson, the machine, kind of confronts Joaquin Phoenix, the man, about the truth of the relationship and how she's kind of been doing things that he didn't know about behind his back as he sees it, she starts to, you know, come clean with him on that. She introduces him to another machine character, which is takes the personality of Alan Watts, a guy who is famous for sort of bringing to the Western consciousness these Eastern ideas about mysticism and spirituality that previously were not talked about. So I found that aspect kind of interesting that they did that.
Yeah. Well, in the film, it was actually the AIs that created him. A bunch of AIs got together, including Samantha, and they formed a think tank. And what they did was basically collect and aggregate every bit of information, every video clip, every writing, every memoir, every photo, every single piece of information that was available on Alan Watts. And they, you know, from that data, created an AI with his personality, which they were able to communicate with. You know.
It's what the transhumanists call a soft upload of the personality, I believe, is their terminology for that. Yeah, into machine consciousness. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, you know, it reminds me a lot of Ray Kurzweil.
Very much.
His particular goals that he has in mind in terms of resurrecting his dead father.
Correct. Yeah.
And uploading all the information that he has on his father into a supercomputer and rebirthing him in the form of some kind of artificial intelligence, so he can be, you know.
So he can live again.
Live again, and so he can
resurrection.
Be rejoined with his daddy. But even Ray Kurzweil had a few things to say about this film, which is quite interesting.
That's true.
And it goes back to what we were talking about before. I mean, he was interviewed on the film after he saw it, and it goes back to what we were talking about before in terms of what AIs, you know, might represent in terms of our sociological and emotional development and our relationships and things like that. And he says, in my view, biological humans will not be outpaced by the AIs because they will enhance themselves with AI. It will not be us versus the machines, whether the machines are enemies or lovers, but rather we will enhance our own capacity by merging with our intelligent creations. We are doing this already, even though most of our computers, although not all, are not yet physically inside us. I consider that to be an arbitrary distinction. There's a few other things that he says there, but he's had some interesting things to say about that film.
Sure. Yeah, well, as always with Kurzweil, he is presenting this set of ideas about artificial intelligence and about what it will be. Like, this is how it's going to go down. We're going to merge with the machines. This is how it's going to be. And if you're going to talk about artificial general intelligence as a reality that's coming, I mean, that's one thing. We can say that, look, eventually this thing's going to happen. That's fair enough. But to throw on this set of ideas that it's going to be this and it's going to be that, again, is foolish, because how in the world are you going to ascribe a value system or a set of goals to this thing which we don't even know what it would be? You can't do that. But again, there's an agenda in doing that sort of thing. Like, okay, AI will come, it will be this. And it's also a set of it's idealistic thinking too, in that, hey, look, this is what we want. This is what we want to do. This is our agenda, and we're going to build machines to do it. And like, again, the warning from the wise would be, hey, look, if you're getting into this territory where, it's really mysterious and you're not going to be able to predict it, it's complete unpredictability, you would be wise to note the fact and just know that, hey, look, we don't know what we're doing. And the prudent person would be like, well, perhaps taking that into account, maybe we should put on the brakes here and not sort of rush towards this, and take it easy a little bit. And again, reflect inward instead of looking outward. Reflect inward. Who are we really, and what are we prepared to do? How is human consciousness changing? How do we do it ourselves? And what would happen if we did embody this advanced being in the midst of our issues? What actually would happen? We don't know.
No, we don't know. And especially if we were to create something that was, the whole idea, the whole concept of artificial intelligence is very ambiguous in itself, because when we talk about intelligence, what is it exactly that we're talking about? Are we we're talking about something like the character Samantha in the film AI, that represents the AI in the film. She seems to. She really does seem to embody intelligence in all of its forms. I mean, she has humor, as you say. She's emotionally intelligent. She's able to cater to Theodore's needs. She's able to make him feel happy, and she's very sensitive. She can talk to him about his problems. She can be there for him. She has fun. She's got a sense of humor. She even writes music. There's a couple of scenes in the film where she literally just starts, jamming, just writing these beautiful piano pieces for Theodore, where they're sort of, when he's lying on the beach, and so it throws up all of these questions of what would AI actually be, what would an artificial intelligence actually be? And it's something that, as you say, we would just have no concept of whatsoever, because all that we're capable of really understanding is human intelligence.
And we're not very good at that either.
And we're not very good at that either. That in itself is something that we still don't really understand, and consciousness itself is still something which is a total mystery. I mean, no one knows what it is. I mean, science tends to ignore it. It doesn't like to deal with it because it doesn't fit in with the more popular Darwinian model of human origins and human evolution. So they generally just tend to sort of sweep that one under the carpet and say, oh, it's just some random epiphenomena. It doesn't really exist. It's kind of like some kind of a delusion. But of course, all that does really is it's a circular argument, because it presupposes consciousness. It assigns, facets of consciousness as the reason for consciousness, is the existence of consciousness. So it's a ridiculous argument. But again, we come back to the fact of, well, what would this be? We would have no way of we would have no reference point for it. And that is brought out very, very well towards the end of the film, during the winter of this relationship, when the dynamics start to break down between them. when the AI character Samantha starts to, realize that she is, capable of so much more, and is, she's grown beyond her programming. She's basically evolving, and they use that term quite frequently in the film. She's evolving, to become more than what she was previously programmed to be, and so it does a great job of exploring, how different, and how incomprehensible an AI would be. And I mean, there's even that one scene in the film where she finally admits to Theo that she is actually, speaking to all these other people, and she's in love with hundreds of other people at the same time. And she tries to explain to him that, well, just because I'm in love with, 600 other people doesn't mean that I love you any less. It actually makes my love for you stronger, that's just something that he can't wrap his head around, and it's something that no sane human being could wrap their head around, really. No. I mean, of course, there are people out there who practice, polygamy.
Polygamy,
they have
sure.
That they have multiple partners, and we live in a society that's becoming more and more prone towards the whole idea of short-term relationships and relationships that are based solely on our appetites, most especially our sexual appetites. But
and more and more. Well, I could go on about like what relationships are becoming. In our, they're changing big time, and people would do well to really take note about where those changes are headed. And I think you and I are going to talk about that at length at some time. So this will be a little teaser for people in that regard right now.
That's right, because I think we both have a lot to say on this particular subject, and it's kind of an amorphous thing, because it deals with because it's dealing with emotions, it's dealing with something which we all can feel and relate to in some way, and we all have our own opinions, we've all got our own baggage, we've all got our own issues and our own feelings, and so trying to speak objectively and have a structured conversation about these types of concepts is very difficult.
Yes.
As I said at the beginning of the interview, but again, this particular film is a great introduction to some of the other conversations we're going to be having in future, because it does deal with so many of these complex issues in terms of where relationships are going, and as I said before, the Samantha character in the film, this artificial intelligence, to me really does just symbolize where we are already in terms of how our relationships are changing, and how we deal, and how our emotional dynamics are changing, how the way we relate to one another is changing, how the dynamics of communication are changing, and how more emotionally dysfunctional, withdrawn, and dependent on technology we are becoming, how we have become that, and how we are becoming that more so in the future, and where this could possibly lead in the future as well. So
Yeah, I guess, I don't know. There's so much in this film, but I feel for now, let's just wrap up the conversation for now. I mean, perhaps we'll do a second hour. What do you think on that, Adam?
I think so. I think there's so much more to talk about in terms of this film, and I know this has been a bit of a messy interview. We've kind of been all over the place here.
I like it.
Well, that's good. I mean, I'm always my own worst critic, but hopefully, if people have seen the film, and I would very, very, very much recommend people to go and see this film, especially before listening to the interview, rather, because I don't think it's going to make much sense unless you have seen the film. So I would highly recommend people go and see it. But I think once people have seen it, and if they listen to the hour that we've just recorded now, I think they'll get a general gist of the incredible complexities and philosophical questions and issues which this film illustrates and brings up, and prompts you to ponder, and so I think for that reason we could definitely do a second hour on this film and talk in much more depth about a number of the other issues which come up in this film. I mean, not just in terms of the whole the relationship side of things, and how that's changing, and its relationship to technology, but also some of the more, I don't know, mysterious or esoteric or sort of metaphysical concepts and ideas which are presented in this film. Although they're presented in a much more subtle way, they're certainly there. There's certainly lots of little bits of symbolism and lots of little references, and so we could go into that definitely.
Yeah. So be sure to check out the second hour here, which will be really a supplement to this. And as you said, we'll get into the esoteric side of things. I think just more details that we both noticed we'll just bring up in the second hour. So that will be available along with this on my podcast feed, which is the Trans Resistor radio feed. You can listen at ageoftransitions.com. Be available for you to download there. So be sure to subscribe to it for more. And Adam, your website is cerebralrevolt.com. Is there anything else that you'd like to say about the second hour and everything else?
No. I mean, of course, as I always say, cerebralrevolt.com is still under construction, so just bookmark it, and it is going to be up soon. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the second hour, and so I apologize if people feel we've perhaps been a bit all over the place today, but that's just the nature of this film, because every single theme and every single concept that we've discussed today is not a separate thing. All the themes and the concepts in this film have been woven together, and very, very intricately linked to one another. And so it's hard to talk about this film in a structured way. All we've been able to do really is just sort of, wing it and just see what pops up in conversation, and just list off a whole bunch of little observations here and there. And I think the second hour is probably going to be much of the same, but, hopefully, as a whole, once we've recorded both 2 hours, I think we will have given people a lot to think about in terms of this film, and its incredible complexity and all the philosophical and sociological questions which this film forces you to think about. So yes.
So thank you very much for listening to this podcast, and we'll see you in the next hour on the other side.
Speak to you soon. Take care.